We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hello and welcome to today's episode of The VUU, Voices of Unitarian Universalism. I am Aisha Hauser. My pronouns are she, her, and I come to you from the land of the Coast Salish people, also known as Seattle, and it is wanting to be sunny, but such as Seattle is, there are a lot of clouds in the sky. We have really fun guests today, some amazing religious educators who I'll introduce after the round. And today, Intersex Awareness Day 26. Welcome. Michael, what's the weather where you are?
Greetings, beloved. This is the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino in Peekskill, New York, a little bit north of New York City, on the lands of the Kitchewan and Wappinger people. It is a bright, sunny day here, a little unusually warm for fall. We're going to revel in the next couple of days of warm before we get frosty weather next week. And it is, like you can see, the natural light is just streaming in. I'm lit only by the natural light from my window. It is a beautiful, bright, sunny day. DC Fortune, how are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm DC Fortune. I am coming to you from Silence Grove, Pennsylvania, where I serve a congregation at in Northumberland. We are in the lands of the Susquehanna people, for which the Susquehanna River is named. And right now, my heart is beating for my friends and family in Maine. terrible, terrible mass there yesterday evening. And it's just, Maine last year had 29 murders in the whole state. In Maine, the state police investigate every murder because most towns just don't have the professional police training. They don't have a homicide division, So yeah, it's a tough one up there. So far everybody I know in my friends and family list are checking in that they're okay. But pray for our colleagues who are chaplains. Reverend Claire Curall. Oh, okay. All right. So they have a named suspect who doesn't need to go here, who apparently targeted a couple of different public venues and walked in with a AK-47, and he attacked a local bowling alley where it was youth night. Then he went to a local bar, which is sort of at the other end of town. But when you understand that it was only 3 miles away, like that's the size of the town. And like Lewiston is the second largest city in Maine. And that's across town is 3 miles, right? So it's not like Maine is one really geographically diverse small town. Like everybody knows somebody from everywhere. And so he is said to have shot up the bowling alley and then shot up a bar and grill where it was, cornhole tournament. And then nobody's seen him since. They found his car at a boat landing in Lisbon, Maine, which is not far from Lewiston. And I mean, like, you live in Maine long enough, like, I know where that boat landing is. I know where that boat landing is. I know where Lisbon is. I used to belong to the sheep workers union, and our office was in Lisbon. I've got a colleague who's a chaplain who lives in Lisbon, and I was texting with her last night, and she said, well, there's helicopters everywhere. And she said, but I have my lights off, and I'm tucked in bed, and my doors are off. My doors are locked, which you have to understand in Maine is a thing. Like, I've lived in a couple of different places in Maine where I didn't have a house key because I left my keys in my truck in the driveway. It was my truck. Everybody knew it was my truck. Anybody else driving it, somebody's going to pull it over. I mean, it's that kind of, So I was on the phone a few minutes ago with a friend who's in Monmouth, and she said that the police there are saying to shelter in place. So that's a little closer to Augusta. There's just really no telling where this guy went or what he did. There is the usual assortment of, thoughts and prayers flooding in from all sorts of places. I will say that Maine's governor, Janet Mills, I knew Janet when this is Maine. I knew Janet when she was the attorney in Farmington, Maine, in Franklin County, and I was a darkroom at the local weekly newspaper, and we saw each other at Democratic Party events and stuff, and like when I see her, it's been 30 years, but I see her, I can like tell her my name and she'll know who I am, right? But she was on the TV, and she offered super, super pastoral message to the people of Maine, to law enforcement, to families, to and celebrating just how much of a small community Maine is and how everybody shows up for everybody. Um, and so it's just an incredibly sad day. And this guy had significant mental health challenges, had been spent a couple of weeks in a mental health inpatient facility over the summer.
That is, many people with mental health issues don't shoot up murder.
Right.
So
right.
that is, I mean, yes, sure, he
And
had that, but
he
this
had-
country's problem is guns.
And he had threatened to
Yeah.
shoot up the local Army Reserve facility where he was a firearms instructor.
Oh, okay. So this country, yeah. I also have a deep connection to Maine. And it is, I mean, I have friends in Lewiston, and I just heard about this right when we were on the VUU, so I will check in with them after we're done here. It's this country needs to deal with its rampant, commodification of death and murder, because what else are guns for?
And the toxic masculinity that doesn't allow men to process emotion in any other way than anger and violence.
And our fetishization of weapons and of guns, of big guns, of guns whose only purpose is the mass murder of human beings.
Right.
And that is what it is.
That's it.
And this guy is being described by neighbors and communities as, I mean, his family were very much Second Amendment supporters. Their house was more of a compound.
I don't want to give his family or him any attention. I hear what you're saying, DC, but we need to, because this is a person who caused destruction, and this is on the blood of all those people who died and who continue to die, who have died, is on the legislatures who won't do fucking shit about. Toxic masculinity needs a whole, revolutionary transformation spiritually, and we could fucking stop guns from being on the street. We did a gun it is deeply painful, and everyone is being touched by mass shootings in this country, because what do we do? What do we do, right? And it's my anger is from deep sadness and deep disappointment, and as faith leaders, we are, I'm sorry. I'm angry because it feels like there should never be one more person in this country dying as a result of a gun. It's awful. DC, my heart is with you in the place of your birth, and the place that formed who you are has been touched by this constant violence. In the state of Washington, a couple of times there's been gun buybacks, where you get gift certificates, gift cards to buy guns. So there's some effort in some places. I mean, it's not nearly enough, right? But it's something. But I'm so sorry, DC. I mean, the pain is deep, and like you said, everyone in Maine it is a geographically big state. It is people-wise. Everybody knows everybody in some capacity. So I'm really, really, Michael?
To our guests.
Today we have 3 LREDA members. Now, I served for like 22 years as LREDA president, not that long. I started my tenure at the pandemic, and I just completed in June, and now the president of the Liberal Religious Educators Association is Catherine Childs. And I believe it is the first time we have an openly trans and openly Canadian. So our guests are Tim Atkins, who serves as the director of Lifespan Religious Exploration at the First Unitarian Church of Oklahoma City, and he serves on the LREDA board as secretary, and he also serves on the UUA, Unitarian Universalist Association nominating committee. and in the past has served on the UUA board. And he's in his 11th year as a professional religious educator. Courtney McKenny is Director of Lifespan Faith Development at the UU Church of Birmingham, Alabama, one of my favorite places on the planet, and is also on the LREDA board with the portfolio of continental events. And Courtney is also on the UUA nominating committee. And Jenn Blosser is Director of Faith Formation at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Hartford County, Maryland, and a member of the LREDA nominating committee. Welcome, all three of you. Now, this past October, a few weeks ago, was the LREDA Fall Conference. I did not attend. I took a little bit of a break after being president for 22 years. So I'd love to hear from the three of you. I've heard only fabulous things, but we'd love to hear from the three of you what the topic was, what it was like for you all, where it was. So whoever wants to start. How about you, Courtney? As Continental Events, you are the person who is charged with leading this and putting it all together.
Oh, is that what that is? Yeah. That is. Yeah, thank you for having us today. I'm super excited to be here. Let's see, our topic this year was celebrate, resist. Oh gosh, I've literally already left my brain. Make a joyful noise. Thank you, Jen. Make a joyful noise, celebrate, play, and resist. So we were lifting up different ways to be joyful in our troubled times. So our first day of our conference was focusing on play. And so we had an opportunity for religious educators to look at play in a way that it can affect their ministry. Things like using games in your congregational life, or how adults can actually continue to play throughout their life. So that was pretty fun. And then on Friday, we focused on race and had a fabulous speaker from the Milwaukee area, Reggie Jackson, join us and speak to us about how Milwaukee is working towards being more or less segregated, because it is one of the most segregated cities in the country, and what his role has been in that. And people had an opportunity, attendees had an opportunity to visit the American Black Holocaust Museum in Milwaukee as part of that day and that conversation. And then Saturday, we were joined by Alex Capitan and the Transforming Hearts Collective. And we spoke about what we can do to support trans families and trans youth in our congregation, and looked a lot at some of the terrible things that are going on in our country for trans folks. So, and this was all woven together with fabulous worships by Beverly Horton from one of our Canadian congregations, and it was just a beautiful experience. So I had a fabulous time on the backside of things. So hopefully maybe Jen and Tim can give a little more input into what things look like from the other side.
Yeah. Tim, I'll jump in first to talk a little bit about the theme. And then Jen, a little bit, I'll toss it to you to talk a little bit about how that theme was presented. So the LREDA board a few months ago, when we were talking about the theme for FallCon, we like to take a look at, we were brainstorming as a board, what are the topics and things we're seeing out there in our congregations right now? What kind of themes do we see out there in broader religious exploration and education? And one of those was the games-based. Right now, we're kind of seeing a wave of game-based stuff coming out really organically in our congregations. And that's just something I've been able to see, kind of from my perspective, that folks are doing game-based programs right now, both games-based Sunday morning programs, and we really thank Kathy Smith for helping our religious educators see the value and the promise and all the excitement about games-based curriculum. Her and Reverend Craig did a presentation on their Dungeons and Dragons-based world-building curriculum. And we've been using that curriculum at my congregation. It's going quite well so far. And the whole curriculum is about coming you take your class through the world building process of a role playing game, and through that, when you're talking about what rules for the environment is there in our fake world, you're talking about what needs to happen to our environment in the real world. So it's going really great. Talk about board games. We've been doing a lot of board game stuff at my congregation in Oklahoma City. And we've been doing a monthly board game potluck night. We've been doing board games during coffee hour for folks. We did a board game curriculum during the summer, which was a huge hit. And so I talked some about how we've been using board games in Oklahoma City and why, right? Like, why are board games suddenly seeing a resurgence right now, especially in congregational life? And I think it's post-pandemic, we're all seeking connection because the pandemic really shut all that connection down, and we're so recovering from that. And board games are a great way for introverts to make connections, right? Because there is a shared activity, there is a shared hobby, a shared thing you're doing together, which is the automatic icebreaker. And let's face it, I think your average VUU church has maybe a few more awkward introverts than your other type of church, right? And so we awkward introverts loving those board games. So we see a lot of board games, so we wanted to lift up the importance of board games and joy and connection. And we wanted to talk more about, we always want to talk about anti-racism, multiculturalism at LREDA and fall conferences. And we are, of course, seeing huge attacks on trans families. And so how to help support trans families is another thing that's facing all of our congregations right now. Something I deeply appreciated about Trans Day was Alex had us break up into tables based on how bad it is in our state. And what I appreciate about that is I had this little frustration at General Assembly. I'm in a red state. I'm in Oklahoma where things are awful. But I just felt like a lot of my time at General Assembly was spent educating folks on the coast about how bad it really is. And when we were able to break up into those small groups based on how bad it really is in our states, I was able to jump into the conversation without needing to have that explanation time. So it was very helpful on my end. And I did want to look up. So on our one thing that LREDA was sure to do on our multiculturalism day and our trans day was to have a space, a healing, joyful space for folks who are part of those communities so they don't have to sit through a workshop about them, right? And so we had open space for our people of color and indigenous folks. We had a space for our trans folks during the trans workshop. And I just think it's an important element of LREDA Fall Conference that when we are having a workshop about a marginalized community, that we do not force the marginalized communities to sit through another workshop about them. That they have a healing space for themselves. So Jen, what did you think about Fall Conference?
So the thing that first I want to give a shout out to was the fact that everyone did an incredible job, like on the planning side of things, uniting the in-person and online experience. So like 10 points to everyone involved in coordinating that, because it was really cool. You know, we have everyone participating has a shared Facebook group so we can kind of talk about things and figure out who we're having lunch with. But also it was really neat as an in-person attendee, seeing people talk about how great it was online. So yeah, it was just really great from a technical standpoint because it felt inclusive and awesome in that way. So thank you. But I just think that it was such a great and timely topic as well. You know, something that we have been, like, the world has basically been on fire for a very long time, right? And it's really hard sometimes when you sit around and look at like the cold, hard realities of pick your topic, like whatever particular trouble you want to think about. You try and even think of how things can get better. And that's why I think play and imagination and celebration are so sacred in our work, right? Because sometimes, you know, and I'm going to talk about this in the context specifically of working with children and youth coming out of a pandemic, a lot of whom are carrying identities that are targeted in various ways, and they are seeing world news that is, you know, full of all kinds of horrible things. Now, I don't want to name it all because it's too much for all of us, I think. But what's so great is embracing this idea of play, facilitating connection and facilitating safe space, or at least brave space, but also facilitating imagination and fantasy in a way where we can build that something larger, that healing world, right? If Unitarian Universalism is about building heaven on earth, there's a lot of imagination and fantasy that goes into that. And sometimes that means, breaking away from ways we've done things before and embracing silliness and like finding the tiniest things to celebrate and rejoice about and honor, because when the world is on fire, those small things are really, really important too. So I was astounded by, of course, all the programming was great, and shout out to everyone who contributed to workshops on play, because y'all, I really wish I could have been in multiple places at once to attend more of them. But it was just really, really fabulous to also have so many side conversations with people about, wow, this whole new paradigm, this sort of whole new pedagogy of play is just so inspirational today in particular. So that's my first thought.
Okay. So one of the things that we talked about along with the idea of play in our planning conversations was also looking at the joy in resistance and lifting that up as well. That we do have so much work that we're doing that's hard, challenging, heavy work, and that there is a joy to that as well, even if it is filled with pain at the same time. And we wanted to lift that up, which is kind of links to the work we were doing and making sure we had the rest and play spaces for our folks their groups we were talking about. So that was intentionally part of the conversation as well. But the other thing that as a board we've been really, and you kind of spoke to this a little bit, was that online component. And we've been really intentional about working, first of all, with a really fabulous tech person, Tanner Linden, and creating this amazing online component to our conferences as well. So that not only are the folks who are attending online able to be intertwined in the work that we're doing, but they're getting valuable work as well, or they're getting valuable experiences as well. Jessica Harwood was our online, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Guru that worked with Tanner and helped all that run smoothly, and did a fabulously amazing job. I had an opportunity to hop into that space during one of our workshops when I just needed to step out of the bigger space. And it was really fabulous. It all ran smoothly and everyone was having great conversations, and it was warm and welcoming. And it made me very happy to see that happening as well. So we're trying really hard to be as inclusive as we can of all of our folks.
Speaking of that, I did, so what was very sweet for me is how many people reached out and texted that they missed me being there, which was very, very sweet. I also, because, such that we are, did hear get some feedback that there were some accessibility challenges, and I'm curious what were some I hear Chuck, what were some lessons learned, and what were some of the things that you found was challenging for folks?
Well, one of the challenges, trying to think, choose my words carefully, because some of this is still in conversation with the powers that be. One of the challenges in working in places that we aren't necessarily familiar with is that sometimes the building does not look how they say it does online. And so we were in this beautiful hotel. It was absolutely a lovely hotel, but there were some pretty heavy duty accessibility issues for folks that had any sort of mobility challenges. So, and we were completely unaware of it. Both the planning team and conference planner were unaware of this situation up until the Tuesday we all arrived and did a walkthrough. So we worked very hard to shift things around and try to be in more inclusive spaces, but there were times when we really just had to be in these really unwelcoming spaces, and that was very hard for a lot of folks. And it was also, I can speak for the fact that it was very hard on the planning team as well, because we felt really responsible for that part of that. Thankfully, religious educators are gracious and lovely and fantastic and forgiving. And so that was nice. But we are still kind of in the midst of hashing all that out with, well, I guess the powers that be is the best way to word it. What do you feel, Mr. Secretary? What do you think?
I will say we can't really get too much into the details of what we'll be doing because we are in process of doing it, right? But I will say that I think that ended up being one of the biggest takeaways of folks from the conference was unintentional lessons on accessibility, right? That is one of the biggest lessons I'm taking away. And how when we say we're accessible, that's not the hotel we were at would say all of their spaces were accessible, right? Because people in a wheelchair could get to them, even to men going through a kitchen, et cetera, et cetera. And so something that I'm taking back from me is when are we talking about accessibility versus just the bare minimum, right? Bare minimum versus welcoming. It caused me to have an entirely new frame at my church, right? When we say spaces are accessible, are we just using the legal definition or are we using a moral definition, right? And so that's kind of on my mind quite a bit more now post-BalCon than pre-BalCon. So sometimes the conference, you've learned something from the theme, but sometimes the world impresses upon you what you need to learn, right? And I think the world impressed upon us that we need to really be cognizant about acceptability. In fact, I can tie that to a story from my church where we do have some inaccessible spaces. But right now, we are seeing a shocking wave of newcomers coming to the Oklahoma City church. And I think it's because of word of mouth that we are a safe place for queer folks in Oklahoma City. We had a group of 6 queer young adults who started visiting the church together, who all have some sort of mental or developmental disability and are looking for an accessible place where they can be queer and be religious together. And so I'm thinking that, the universe is showing me that we need to be placing a stronger emphasis, not just on accessibility, but accessibility from a moral perspective, because our folks who are feeling isolated desperately need this right now.
With folks. So the accessibility issues did give me an opportunity to sit down and talk with some of our friends from Equal Access and have some really great work and conversations there that how LREDA can be kind of at the front of making this work more centered. Because like you said, Tim, a lot of our congregations, we say we're accessible. A lot of us talk about being accessible, but when it really gets down to the nitty gritty, we're not fully accessible, and that's not welcoming. And so I will say that for me, the silver lining to that nasty accessibility part was that I did have some really great conversations with folks about what I personally can do, what LREDA can do as an organization to be better going forward. So that was great. And Jen, I think you're right. I think we could lift up the fact that the hotel was indeed haunted, but it's the 5th most haunted hotel in Wisconsin. We had no idea. It was an exciting little bonus point that maybe you might be visited by a ghosty friend. I don't know.
Into the elevator and all the lights would shut off in the elevator. That kind
Dude,
of
I have some elevator stories.
It was beautiful. The facility was beautiful, looking, but yeah, definitely.
They had a closed water park in the basement that was
Did have
you
a
couldn't
closed
really
water.
access, but pictures got out, and it was a closed.
And it's
Yeah.
well, it's full of mannequins now. The closed water park is just full of mannequins. If you
How
wanted to
cool is that?
there's an entire army of mannequins down in an abandoned water park in the basement of this hotel. So
Oh my God! I'm thinking it's Halloween. You could make bank on that place.
Had we been there just a few weeks later, it could have been a whole other theme.
I have to say, I'm getting an enormous amount of joy that will lift me through the rest of this week at the discussion of 5th most haunted hotel in Wisconsin.
I got a text from a colleague.
Right? Like that there's a list and there are 4 more haunted hotels.
Yes. I got a text from a colleague who was attending who literally was like, "What have you made me do?" And then sent me this article. And I was like, I didn't know, and I'm here too. But yeah.
Like that water park thing, man. Like that's totally like there should be tours and like merch and stuff.
I feel like Ben tried to tour.
Well, I was privy to a group of people who may have pestered staff enough that someone went and management took a photo for us. So, but it was pretty neat. It was pretty neat. But yeah.
Religious educators are persistent.
Well, you know, the theme was play and resist and celebrate. And there was a lot of that in that little space, you know? And actually that's kind of when we were in our small group discussions, one of the questions, the very first question was, you know, like, can you think of like a time where you've, you know, played in your work? And I think everyone in my group just busted out laughing because already that day, right, we had done so many silly, playful, joyful things together. So I don't know, were the small groups specifically born from the 2017 fall conference? I just want to ask if that was part of the history, because I don't know if it was a tradition like the cohort groups, if that was a tradition before, or if that kind of came up from a learning, you know, in...
I should know that.
I really feel like they really started around the 2017 in conjunction with the Southern Region Lead Hiring Crisis, right? I think it was around.
I think it was all part of that learning, right? But
the events of the 2017 conference as well was there was a lot of small group work that did there. I know that the 2 conferences that I've been involved in the planning, it's been a very intentional grouping of folks. So
the small groups are one of, for me anyway, the most sacred moments and like sacred parts of programming for fall conference, because we're grouped together with like small identity-based groups to have really deep conversation. And every year it happens where I end up staying in touch with colleagues from my small groups, right? To like continue those conversations or kind of follow up on things we talked about as far as how we're applying some of what we discussed in our work and our programming. But being able to meet with these small groups, these cohort groups throughout the course of the entire conference is just, it's really profound. And it's something that I've tried to model in a lot of my programming as well, just to create those, you know, I mean, small group ministry we know is wonderful stuff. But recognizing and celebrating small, like identity-based cohort groups and the way you can have deep and powerful conversation with folks who, you know, share some aspect of your, you know, core identity is just such a profound process. And this year in particular, you know, we're talking about all these fun, happy, fantasy, imagination, resistance things, and also we were making space for some really deep learning and some pretty profound and difficult topics as well. Yeah, so I just, you know, I can't celebrate that enough, having that small group time, and the way that conversation and learning flows through that in sharing our personal experiences and often being asked some pretty challenging questions. Yeah, it was really great.
I'm really proud of with this conference is I felt like we had a great mix of experiential learning and like informational learning. So like we had opportunities where we had those deep conversations in small groups, but we also had workshops where you could learn about spirit play, or you could learn about game-based curriculums, or you could learn about how to make a prayer ground at your church. So like you could come back with tangible information, but you also had, like Jenn said, these opportunities for deep, deep conversation with colleagues. And one of the things I find really beneficial about those small groups too is that it's not necessarily people you know or have any interaction with outside of this. So you'll frequently meet, and it is, you know, we've talked about it. Unitarian Universalism is a small world, but there's still, especially in religious education, so many new folks coming into the work that it's such a great opportunity to meet people who are new to the work or who have been doing the work like Tim has for 11 years. I've been doing this for like 17. I feel like I've been doing it forever. You know, or you meet somebody who started 2 months ago and you make those kind of connections. So I'm really proud of this conference for the variety of ways we got information to folks, for the different tools that they came away with. I'm really proud of this conference, even with some of the bumps. So, oh wait, we should talk about the bookstore, Jenn.
We should talk. Actually, the bookstore was a monumental collaborative effort. If you would like a testimony on how religious educators like to get stuff done, this year's bookstore pretty much sums it up. So originally it'd been set up in a very lovely, sizable room with plenty of tables and lots of space for, because everybody hangs out at the bookstore. Come on, we all want to talk about the books. We want to share our favorite pages and illustrations from our favorite storybooks, you know, and tons of religious educators are also showing up with their own crafts. Tim brought his beautiful chalices. So, you know, like folks are selling stuff there too and talking about that, which is really cool. But like, what, 2 days in, we had to move to the bookstore to a room like the third of a size. And I just want to shout out to the incredible Aaron Powers, who like managed to keep their cool running this whole thing and was like, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Rounded up a team of volunteers. And
long time at LREDA Spaces, the Lerner family, Andrea Lerner, would take on the bookstore. And when she retired, we missed Andrea terribly, and Aaron Powers from Florida took on the bookstore. And so that legacy continues. And of course, when you got a group of religious educators and books, right, like it's going to happen. And so one of the most common things is, you know, you got colleagues just plop in there as they're going through the books, say, oh yeah, I've got that book. Like it's just word of mouth throughout the whole time, right?
Here's where I use that book. This one's great for this.
No, yes. So I came back from fall college with, I think 40 books in total, something like that. Yeah, I need to read our church library.
Yeah, we work with In Spirit bookstore, and they are graciously send us this amazing collection of books that folks are able to put their hands on and touch, and then order online. And
oh yeah, folks are excited about some of the new releases. Oh yeah, like Jenny Shabik's got a new book out about rituals for toddlers, and just, you know, we were talking about earlier, Jen, we were talking about how essential some of these joyful moments in the lifespan, and that folks are seeking them more. It's just such a well-timed thing about the rituals for toddlers. Yeah. But
my favorite part of the bookstore is all the amazing, beautiful things that our colleagues bring to it. Like I have a sticker on my water bottle that I got at PawCon, and I bought multiple crocheted or chalices to use with my little kids, and and we won't talk about the number of things that I bought that the fabulous Jenn Blosser made. So, and it's just such a great opportunity to touch and feel and take home amazing things that our colleagues put their love and work into. So it's just such a great thing. And then Aaron Powers is a rock star. Makes it all happen.
So a couple of other fall con traditions that we can kind of look up. Right? One is what used to be called the Odyssey speaker, which is now called the Journey speech. I think. Boy, I should remember that title. And this year we invited the Reverend Dr. Mr. Barbree to give our journey lecture, which was Saturday night, and the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee hosted us in their lovely, historic, creepy old building. It was lovely. And Barb gave a nice like half-hour journey reflection about their journey in the world of RE and outside. It was I'm glad that we were able, even though we had bettered the name away from Odyssey, because Odyssey implies it's just one person doing all the things. It's really that one person is a representation of the community doing the whole thing. But I'm glad that we were able to keep the speech going, because that was a really moving moment. So there are a couple other fun FalCon traditions. One I'll talk about is just games in the lobby. Every year there seems to be a specific game of FalCon. The game of FalCon this year is called Unable, Unwilling. Unable, Unwilling. In the game, you are acting as the leadership of a small Quaker congregation who is desperately trying to get your volunteer slots filled. You're trying to personally dodge the volunteer slots and make other people do them. Okay? So the entire point of the game is to get other people nominated for the positions, but not yourself. And then eventually there's a where these are it's made by the Quakers in England, called Unable, Unwilling. Big thanks to Kathy Smith and C.B. Beale for bringing that. We took it to the EOA nominating committee meeting last weekend. They had a blast.
I feel like that the three of us, particularly from REDA, are very attuned to nom-com work, and it was, for me, very, very on point.
Now, there's another big FalCon tradition that I have never personally partaken in, but I do believe I'm in the room with two people who do. Would you all like to explain that FalCon tradition?
I like your post is so much more visible. So yeah, there is a kind of a FalCon tradition that has just grown exponentially from the grassroots. From the truest tradition. It was an inside joke among a few folks, and then it just kind of like blossomed out now into an annual tradition of getting tattoos. And so I'm running out of space is the thing. But it's a lot of fun, and it turns into this sort of strange ritual where you end up with different groups of people at a time at a tattoo parlor, and there's a lot of research that goes into this beforehand to make sure that the tattoo parlor is typically like Black or women owned. It varies where you are, what we can find, but for the most part, we've been able to be really like justice centered in our selection. And we end up, drifting down with different colleagues, and it turns into this fabulous sort of hangout space to talk about work and talk about life and be, really revel in the sacred silliness and end up with these symbols that, you always carry, remind you of everything that you learned in that conference. So it's pretty cool and very silly.
I have loved explaining to people what the tattoo signifies, because they're like, why do you have a ghost tattoo on you? I'm like, the hotel was haunted.
So the hotel was haunted, but also we'd spent a long time trying to think like, what could represent play? And we were thinking of the spirit of play. And then when I went to the Black Holocaust Museum, you may have noticed if there was a staff member there wearing a T-shirt that with a little ghost on it that said, "Don't be racist, boo." And the idea, right? But the idea like of something so playful and cute and affirming in this museum that was dealing with such, serious, heavy topics as well. It just really spoke to the entire conference, that little, snapshot. So yeah, that's kind of how the ghost came to be. There are a few other designs that came up, but it was really amazing. But yes, there were definitely, the hotel was also definitely haunted. I don't know
I love it. We skipped our normal UU roundup, but I have an item that pertains to religious educators that I want to get in before we wrap up, because I would like to invite this energy, this radical, joyful, liberatory, anti-oppressive, faith, development, energy into my spiritual home, which is the Southeast Unitarian Universalist Summer Institute, also known as SUSE, which takes place now in Western North Carolina at Western Carolina University, a little bit west of Asheville. And I am the director for next year's SUSE. It's a long, complicated story. I'm the interim director. I had to step in, and we just changed our policy this Sunday. I convinced our board to change our policy. For a long time, any minister who came to SUSE got half off their registration the first time they came. And it was a really great way to convince ministers to come to SUSE. Well, starting this coming year, that policy is being extended to religious educators. So any religious educator who comes to SUSE will automatically get half off their registration, their first year at SUSE. And if you happen to have a volunteer job at SUSE that is already paying for your registration, you can transfer that half off to someone else who you're bringing with you, a member of your family or a friend. So that's new too, because we want people to bring folks that they love to come with them. So listen, if you know anyone who is really super passionate about development for 11 to 13-year-olds to volunteer with us, I've got and is able and willing. We just talked about unable and willing, but is able and willing. I've got a volunteer opportunity that will pay their whole way to SUSE. And Tim, I guess you have a question.
So I have long heard of SUSE. I grew up in the Lancet congregation. That's where I found Unitarian Universals and love SUSE. So SUSE seems intimidating if you've never gone before, right? So what advice would you have for someone who is considering going, but is worried that, hey, it's a long-standing thing, it's going to be my first time, and there's, oh my gosh, so much to choose from, what do I do? Overwhelmness. What tips do you have for someone who's a little worried about that?
It can be a lot. For those of you who don't know SUSE, we've prided ourselves at being the second largest annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists after GA, though we're about half the size that we were before the pandemic. So it's a lot. It's smaller and more intimate and less overwhelming than it was even in 2019. So come now and get used to it.
Now's the time. Yeah.
While it's still a little smaller than it used to be. We actually have people on our, we call it staff, but everybody's a volunteer. It's usually nobody gets paid on our staff who are specifically designated to help newcomers integrate into the community. And Diana, or whoever Diana's place is, Diana's not going to do it next year. They do a phenomenal job of helping people sort through that, assigning them to buddies to help them make those choices. And I would say my biggest piece of advice is, like, know what brings you joy, right? Know what fills your spiritual cup, and put that on your schedule first, right? So if art brings you joy, sign up for an art workshop, sign up to make mosaics or do quilting or paint. If worship brings you joy, like, make sure the worship services are on your calendar first, because there'll be some good worship. If music brings you joy, concert hour on your schedule first, because there are concerts every night from amazing folk musicians. And then, like, don't worry too much about putting a lot of other things, right? Put the things that fill up your cup, that stretch you a little bit. I first came to SUSE, goodness, now, like 28 years ago, 27 years ago, and I was brought there as a member of the teen staff, right? So I was brought there to work with the 14 to 17-year-olds, which got me into being a religious educator, which made me a minister. So allow yourself to be transformed. So that's
Does any
my shout out. Like, come, and we'll help pay for you to be there.
That is super exciting. Does anyone what are your plans for LREDA Fall Conference for next year? Do we have any teasers? Do we know what's happening?
Well, not that I can announce at this point. It is
Okay.
happening. It's going to be amazing because it's always amazing. I'm not even sure if I can say one thing that I'm thinking. That there's well, nobody watches this, right? Like it's just us hanging out in the kitchen. So no, it's not as exciting as I'm making it sound. It will potentially be an online. So we'll really lean into our online work that we've been doing and making it super accessible for folks across the board, which it's great. It's fabulous. And now that I've experienced the fabulous work of Tanner Linden and his online fantasticness, I'm super confident that we can make it fabulous. So, but that's going to like.
I'm making a push that in a couple of years we end up in Oklahoma City. The tribes have come together and are building a hotel and conference center and water park. And, right by the first
water park without mannequins, or
right by the first Americans Museum in downtown Oklahoma City. So Oklahoma City can host conferences without the state of Oklahoma getting a dime, and it all goes to the native tribes. That sounds like a winner to me. So
yes,
I love the thought of giving First Americans our money as opposed to.
So I just want to know, mannequins or no mannequins in the water park, Tim?
I think there will always now be mannequins at FallCon. Yes.
I feel like this is a group photo now. Like if there is a water park, you're just gonna have a bunch of DREs like in a position. Take the picture.
Yes, Jen. Yes. There's a tattoo for that year. There you go.
Well, wait, wasn't the mannequin challenge like something that happened like 5 years ago? Wasn't there a song that went with that?
Oh,
yeah. 5 years too late is still better than we usually are. All right.
Oh, the shade. Oh, Tim, the shade.
Oh, one thing I want to lift up before we go, we were really conscious about COVID protocols this year. We did some work on being
for that.
Amazing job inform people about ways to stay safe in a world, and did a lot of testing folks.
We could test and had folks who agreed to be volunteers to help food and stuff for folks who were down to their rooms because of COVID. So we had a really good care team set up.
Yeah.
It seemed to work pretty well.
And it was like a huge part of also modeling accessibility, right? Or practicing accessibility.
Right.
Hugely. It was awesome.
Making us a safe place for everybody. So he was an absolute rock star. So
yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you
This
for having
was
us.
amazing. Thank you and have a wonderful week. And DC, we are praying for everyone in Maine, and our hearts are with you. I know how hard this has been. Sending love to you, and thank you all so much. Have a great week. Ciao. Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.